"Sir, this area is restricted," the ranger barked, voice cutting through the quiet forest like a whip. But Walter, 72, didn't even break stride. His joints may have protested, but his pace didn't slow. Something had drawn him forward, a faint cry, a child's voice, distant and trembling. It was all the invitation he needed. Training from a lifetime ago kicked in like muscle memory. He moved swiftly, eyes scanning the dense terrain, senses tuned to survival and instinct. Hours later, while the sun dipped low behind the hills and Walter sipped warm tea from an old thermos on his creaky porch, a black government SUV rolled up the gravel path leading to his cabin. Out stepped a man in a perfectly tailored suit, holding up a badge with the quiet confidence of someone used to commanding attention. United States Secret Service. If that gave you chills, maybe you understand what it means when forgotten heroes finally get seen. Walter Hughes wasn't just a senior citizen living in a hand-built cabin near Cedar Grove National Park. He was once a top reconnaissance scout during the Gulf War, a man whose eyes could detect footprints a day old or threats before they surfaced. Now retired, Walter spent his days living quietly off the edge of the woods, sharing his time with his aging beagle, Rusty, and keeping mostly to himself. Locals referred to him as that woodsman guy, or the hermit vet. Some speculated about his past. Others just nodded politely in the grocery store and moved along, sensing a depth they didn't want to disturb. Then came the day everything changed. Word spread fast through the town of Maple Ridge that Senator Diane Whitaker's granddaughter, Little Lily, had disappeared during a routine afternoon hike near Bear Creek Trail. The 6-year-old had wandered off while her family was distracted setting up lunch. Within 15 minutes, she was gone, swallowed by thick woods and silence. Helicopters scanned from above, dogs searched frantically on the ground, and rangers organized into desperate squads. But after 3 hours, not even a trace. It was like the forest had decided to keep her. Walter had been buying soup mix and Rusty's dog treats at Granger's Market when he overheard the story. Unlike the others gathered around whispering worst-case scenarios, he didn't say a word. He placed his items on the counter, paid in cash, and walked out. Minutes later, he entered the tree line behind his home, not saying goodbye or explaining his intentions. He just grabbed his carved walking staff and slipped into the woods like a shadow. By the time he reached the main ridge, the park's emergency grid had been set up. 2 rookie rangers spotted him slipping through the southern boundary and quickly moved to stop him. "Sir, that's off limits," one called, clearly annoyed. "This is an active rescue zone." Walter didn't stop. "You've got good hearts, but green eyes. I've tracked ghosts through worse than this," he muttered without slowing. His voice was calm, not challenging, but confident in the way that experience makes a man. The younger ranger, clearly offended, raised his voice. "You think you know better than the teams out here? We don't need another body to search for." But Walter just sidestepped them like rocks on the trail. 2 hours later, far beyond the area anyone had been searching, he spotted it, a scrap of purple fabric tangled in thorns barely visible to the untrained eye. Nearby, soft prints in the muddy bank hinted at someone small, barefoot and alone. He didn't call it in. He followed. As the sky darkened and the official teams began pulling back, Walter emerged from the thicket with Lily cradled against his chest. She was weak, shivering, but unharmed. There were no cameras waiting, no applause. Just stunned rangers who looked from the girl to the man and back again. One muttered, "Should have left it to the pros." Walter didn't reply. He simply wrapped the child tighter in his flannel coat and carried her to safety. Later that evening, he returned to his porch, lit only by the amber glow of a lantern. Rusty laid at his feet, tail occasionally wagging as if sensing something meaningful had happened. The stars blinked overhead, and the forest whispered the way it always did, like it knew things but kept secrets. A ranger truck rolled slowly past, headlights intentionally sweeping across Walter's yard. The driver didn't wave. No thanks came, no call. At breakfast the next morning, Walter's usual booth at the Cedar Hollow Cafe was met with silent stares and hushed comments. "Betty made it up," whispered the waitress to her co-worker. "Just wants attention." A hiker in high-end gear chuckled nearby. Old soldiers like to pretend they're still useful. Sad, really. The local paper barely acknowledged the event. A two-paragraph blurb on page 4 titled, "Girl Recovered." After day-long search didn't mention Walter at all. It credited park authorities with the find, completely erasing the man who had actually carried Lily out of the trees. His neighbors, the same folks who once borrowed sugar or asked for gardening tips, now crossed the street when he walked Rusty. A few had the nerve to complain openly. He had no right to trespass, one said. Could have ruined the official operation. Online gossip spread fast. Posts labeled him a delusional veteran with hero syndrome. One accused him of staging the whole thing, suggesting he might have even hidden the child himself. Walter didn't react. He just scratched Rusty behind the ears and whispered, "She's home. That's what matters." At the ranger station, a closed-door meeting simmered with frustration. One ranger suggested pressing charges. "He made us look incompetent," the supervisor snapped. "This isn't the Wild West. We're trained professionals." No one mentioned that Lily had clung to Walter's neck and refused to let go until she saw her mother. That night, a storm rolled through, hammering Walter's old roof with relentless rain. He climbed a rusting ladder to patch a leak himself, muttering as his knees creaked in protest. Later, with the fireplace crackling and warmth returning to his home, he opened a worn notebook. Inside were names, fellow soldiers from his old unit, many never found. He traced each name gently, lips moving in silent tribute. If stories like this stir something in you, if you believe quiet bravery still matters, comment "respect" below. 2 mornings later, just as dawn broke through, the mist, a government SUV pulled onto his dirt path. Rusty perked up, growling softly, sensing something unfamiliar. A tall man in a crisp suit stepped out, scanning the woods before approaching the porch. Walter was there, whittling a cedar stick as if nothing had changed. "You Walter Hughes?" the man asked, his posture unmistakably military despite the polished exterior. "That's me," Walter said, never putting down the wood. The agent flipped out a badge. "Special Agent Noah Griffin, Secret Service." Walter narrowed his eyes. "Son, I think you're at the wrong cabin." Agent Griffin gave a small nod. "No, sir. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." He handed Walter a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax. "This is from someone who owes you more than words could say." Walter took the envelope, his rough fingers grazing the smooth wax seal. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he studied the agent's face. "You military?" "Marine Corps," Griffin nodded. 8 years. Walter gave a slight grunt of approval and finally cracked the seal. Inside was a thick card embossed with a golden federal emblem. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and unmistakably personal. "Mr. Hughes," it began, "I am told you located my granddaughter when others had already given up hope. The park teams told me how you followed signs no one else could see. Lily calls you her forest guardian. You have my family's deepest gratitude. What you've done cannot be repaid, but I intend to try. With profound respect, Senator Diane Whitaker." Also inside the envelope was a formal letter from the Department of the Interior, signed by the Senator and the Director of National Parks, officially commending Walter for his service and inviting him to Washington, D.C. to be recognized at a private White House ceremony. Walter handed the letter back without reading the rest. "I didn't do it for recognition." Griffin didn't look surprised. He smiled faintly. "Exactly why you deserve it." The story spread fast. Within days, news outlets across the country picked it up. Veteran tracker finds senator's granddaughter, using skills from Gulf War. Clips played on the evening news, accompanied by footage of Walter from years past, his military awards shown for the first time in public. But the part that really made headlines was Walter's response to the invitation. He declined the medal. Instead, he sent a simple letter back, requesting that the funds allocated for his recognition be redirected to upgrade the outdated volunteer search and rescue program in Cedar Grove. The team had been underfunded for years, relying on donated gear and second-hand radios. Walter's request went viral. Social media lit up. Thousands commented, "This man is a real hero. He asked for nothing, gave everything. This is what American values look like." At the Cedar Grove Ranger Station, those same officers, who had once dismissed Walter, now signed a petition supporting his funding proposal. Their supervisor, red in the face, approved official cooperation with Walter's training sessions. The station began sending rookies to him for weekend workshops in tracking and wilderness survival. Senator Whitaker herself appeared on live television. Her voice wavered slightly as she said, "Sometimes we forget that heroes walk beside us, quietly, without medals, without speeches. Mr. Hughes didn't just find my granddaughter. He reminded us what integrity looks like." By Friday morning, Walter wasn't just a shadow in the trees. He had become a legend. 4 young rangers stood at the edge of the trail that had once been considered off-limits, notebooks in hand, waiting to follow his lead. He didn't say much, never had, but the way he moved through the brush, paused to study broken branches or faint prints, taught more than any manual ever could. A month passed. Winter crept in, frosting the edges of leaves and laying the first thin layer of snow across the ridge. At the main trailhead of Cedar Grove National Forest, a new sign was unveiled. It was crafted from oak, protected by a glass frame, and simply read, "Walter's Path, for those who never stop searching." Children posed beside it for photos. Hikers pointed at it with curiosity. Who was Walter, they'd ask. Locals smiled and told the story of the man who didn't wait to be asked, who followed his gut when it counted, and who gave more than he was ever offered. His name became something spoken with quiet pride in town. The same people who once avoided him now greeted him with nods of respect at the general store. One little girl even approached him shyly at the diner and handed him a drawing. "You saved the princess," she said. Walter gave a rare smile. He never moved to Washington, turned down all book offers, declined interviews, said no to documentaries and magazine spreads. "I've done my talking," he told one reporter who showed up unannounced. "Now it's time to listen." And every morning, without fail, he took Rusty for a walk through the forest. Not for exercise, not for attention, but because the woods were where he felt most himself, where his mind quieted, where the ghosts of the past, fellow soldiers, whose names filled his journal, felt close. Sometimes hikers would join him. Veterans mostly. Men and women who saw something in Walter that reminded them of the grit and calm they once knew. He never pushed them to speak. Just let the silence stretch comfortably. Eventually, they'd return, again and again, walking beside him. Some brought their kids, others brought their burdens. All left something behind, fear, regret, shame, and picked up something else instead. Peace. Every December, just before the year's first snowfall, a letter arrived. Always handwritten, always colorful, drawn in crayon or marker, usually with trees, hearts, and a figure with a long walking stick and a dog at his side. "Dear Mr. Walter," it would begin. "I still remember your coat smelled like wood and safety. I hope Rusty is doing good. Thank you for not giving up on me." Signed, Lily Whitaker. Every year, Walter placed the new card beside the others, tacked neatly along a beam in his small living room. Dozens now. All from the same child whose life had once hung in the balance, and who never forgot the man who stepped out of the shadows and brought her home. And though Walter never chased fame, his legacy took root, not just in plaques or headlines, but in the new generation of trackers he quietly trained, in the local SAR team that now operated with proper gear, in the way people looked at old soldiers a little differently, a little more carefully, a little more gratefully. Because sometimes the ones who stay silent are the ones who've carried the heaviest loads. And sometimes a hero doesn't wear medals. He just carries a stick, listens to the wind, and knows when to follow the sound of a child crying through the trees. If you believe stories like this matter, not because they're flashy, but because they're real, then honor the quiet strength around you. It might be your neighbor, your grandfather, or the old man at the diner sitting alone with a dog at his feet and a story no one's asked to hear. Subscribe to Her Feelings Stories, because real heroes don't ask for attention. They just never stop answering the call.